that they're looking for change, they're looking at doing continuous learning, they like to be challenged, and they're not necessarily looking for a lifelong career in the same place doing the same thing. And that's something we need to be really aware of when we're thinking of what are the needs of Generation Next. The Generation Next, including my own children who are now in that adult world, and I see that in them, you know, that they don't see themselves as taking on a career for 20, 30 years. They're not, that's not where they're coming from. And so when you see a comment like lack of commitment, that was where that was coming from, you know, that they're seeing themselves as being flexible and wanting to do continuous learning. Anybody else from any of the groups want to say anything about this?
I think for me, one of the things that, and I wrote it down there, we wrote it down there, is challenging the status quo. But one of the things I like about the next generation is that they challenge us to change our thinking and to do things differently.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the other common theme, if you like, in all the questions. This whole idea of change, which is, you know, very fitting, seeing that the whole theme of this conference, right, is focused on change, and that whole concept of being willing to change. In the panel discussion yesterday, let me see who would have been there. What was her name? Judy? Judy
Reddick.
Thank you. I said, you know, sometimes as an organization we look at ourselves and say, well, we need to change the structure. We need to bring in a new we need to have more diversity, or we need to have younger representation, for example, in an organization. And so you look for and hire somebody new, but then when a new person comes in with new ideas, they go, wait a minute, we didn't really need you to come in and change things, right? So that whole mindset of being open to change is something that we need to look at.
Actually, to follow up,
No, go ahead.
To follow up, I'm actually reading a book right now. It's called Loyalty Unplugged, and it talks about this is the first time ever that there is a possibility of 4 generations working in the same office. Because, you know, people are living longer, so therefore they're working longer, and now we have the newer ones coming up, and so now we have that. And so now there's a really delicate balance now that has to be struck, because it's definitely almost a fight of old versus new. It's kind of interesting. So it kind of fits in with this whole Loyalty Unplugged. Okay, so question number 2 is how to attract the new blood and how to keep them and support them. It seems that a majority of it is job stability and the flexibility and the balance. Change the culture to acknowledge and or appreciate the permanence of low literacy. Do those 2 groups want to explain them a little more?
Well, I think what we talked about is tends to be a perception that low literacy is a temporary problem and that it can be fixed with a temporary solution, but everything indicates that is not the case. You know, literacy rates are not getting any lower. Is that right? Higher?
Higher.
Yeah, higher. So, you know, acknowledging that it is always going to be an element.
I kind of threw the word acknowledge in over appreciate, and the reason that I kind of thought that, and I understand what you're saying, but I think in the field of literacy we're working to acknowledge that low literacy is permanent, but working to change that. So I think that in the work that people do, they're trying to show that the permanence of low literacy is not exactly appreciated, but it's acknowledged, and people are trying to move toward a solution. So to me, acknowledge was a more appropriate word, but I understood what you were saying. I just was kind of playing devil's advocate. So.
And I think part of that too is like acknowledging the value of the work we do. We're often thought of as, oh well, we just teach literacy.
And then there was a whole panel discussion on that Melissa and I attended just before lunch, you know, the professionalization of literacy instructors, what might that look like, who's going to take leadership on it, what are the challenges?
It's interesting that question one, the next generation will move maybe every 5 years from job to job, but yet something we're trying to attract them with is job stability. So does that mean job stability for just 5 years?
Well, I think
Or what does that
what was
mean?
mentioned here was because a lot of them depends on funding, depends where you work. Right, so
Okay.
some people, so
Right.
stability, whether you know you're gonna have a job for the next couple of years, or you're just gonna take a 1-year contract.
Okay.
And I think the stability of a job does not necessarily mean the same person in that job, but knowing that an organization is going to be there and is going to have so many positions. And it might just be that, like, one thing we discussed was that in this unstable environment as a literacy practitioner, you get to develop and prove a lot of skills that you do have, and you know, you kind of develop your portfolio in there, and opportunities are offered to you based on what you're doing, and so people are using it as a stepping stone into other things. So it might not be the same people in that job, but the stability of the job exists.
I think for, if I can just throw something in there, I think for, you know, a lot of people coming up in this generation, well, I'm 26, so I guess that'll give you an idea of where I'm at. And I think that we want to work in a job, like I came to victim services from employment counseling, so I had employment counsel for a year, and I felt like I had learned, and then I had a chance to go work in victim services, and that was a whole other counseling skill set that I was coming into, and then, you know, and then I was asked to be on this literacy board, and then that allowed me to develop another skill set. So I don't think it's that, you know, where it's a lack of commitment. I think, I guess in terms of how I look at it, it's more of a total commitment to myself and my potential. So if I feel in this job after 3 years that I can move into another domain where I can take what I've been able to hone so far and come at things from another angle, but I think essentially my value system for my career would remain the same. It's not that I would turn my back on everything so far and go into this whole other field because I was going to make, you know, $120,000 a year. I think that we want to take, it's stepping, like you alluded to, it's stepping and developing a skill set and being able to offer more. And I think that, you know, that's a challenge that I look forward to, and I know a lot of my friends are the exact same way, you know.
And I think a lot of the people that I speak to, they're preparing themselves for switching jobs every 3 to 5 years because there's this impression that that's the world that's going to exist and they have to prepare themselves for that. But I think if you ask them what they would prefer to do, oftentimes it's, you know, to have a stable job and to have it for a long time. It's just becoming more and more difficult to find such a thing. So to maintain a positive perspective about employment in general, there is a nice spin on the ability to switch jobs frequently too, because of the new skill sets you do develop. But I think there's a lot of people who would appreciate the opportunity to just stay in the same place.
That's right. Like, I can see myself in the job I'm in now for 10 years, 15 years, you know, as long as I'm still finding meaning in it. But if something else came up where it was, you know, a management job or something like that, then you're never going to leave behind what you've done so far. It's just more or less using what you have to offer to the extent that you're aware that you can offer it to benefit other people and obviously to benefit yourself as such. Because for me, I would feel if I stayed in my job for 10 years and didn't pursue higher education and felt that, you know, I was capable of using what I've developed to help people at a higher level, and I didn't do that, then I'd be disappointed in myself and less valuable to whatever organization I was at in turn, essentially, because you lose your passion. And I think that's something we were talking about a lot as well.
I think one of the things that worries older people in the field who look at it kind of broadly is, you know, we look at young people and like one of our moderators, I have adult children, you know, and I want them to have jobs that offer them good wages and benefits and some stability. I mean, stability's great. It gives you the opportunity to make the choice to change. So, but to be able to offer you a job to say that, you know, you will have this job, you know, as long as you want it, the funding's there, it's secure, and to be able to offer you a decent wage and decent benefits, that to me is what we need to do to attract young people, because, I mean, sometimes I love my job, I'm not complaining about it, but I often wonder, why would anybody want to go into, to do this, you know, where you're constantly thinking, you know, where can I get my next dollar?
Yeah, because choosing to change is different from being forced to change.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
You know, if it's a choice, that's different. But if it's circumstances that are making you change as opposed to, you know, it's coming from yourself, then that's a whole different mindset. And I think that's the dynamic we're getting between flexibility and commitment, right? Yes, I think there's a need to acknowledge that Generation Next wants to have the option of moving on and doing continuous learning, but that's a different feeling from being that you're being pushed out because of lack of funding, or that's a different.
Or because you can no longer afford
Yeah.
to live on the wages that you're getting in literacy.
Driven by money and funding
And especially nowadays with student loans. I came out of university, I have an advanced major double minor. I came out $54,000 in
Yeah.
debt. I went to school in Nova Scotia, I'm from Newfoundland. I came out $54,000 in debt. And then I had to get a car as part of my vehicle, as part of my requirements. Right after I graduated university, my father lost his job. So, you know, if I didn't, I'm doing all right now, but if I didn't make a salary that could equate to my loan payments, I can't afford to live on my own. I'm 26 years old. I make pretty good money. I can't, well, you know, above average, I'd say. I can't afford to live on my own. I'm living in my parents' house right now. I pay $600 in student loan payments a month, most of which goes to interest. So, you know, that is a real challenge for our generation. In order for me to pursue a graduate program, which is a big requirement for many positions right now, most of my coworkers do have their masters. I'm very lucky to be where I am. I have to live at home and hope to get in. Going back to school, I want to go to law school. I can't afford law school. That's $30,000 a year. So that's a big challenge for our generation too.
That's a whole-
Everything is so expensive.
That's a whole reality check too for this generation, right?
Okay, let's
And then
get
move on to
through to
question
number three,
3.
so
Yes.
that we can get moving. So how are we gonna protect that organizational knowledge from leaving when that employee leaves?
So I see the highlights, the second ticks from that question. There's a lot of support for job shadowing and mentoring. Ongoing in-depth evaluation and information gathering. Journaling examples of how knowledge is used. Identify key people to pass information to. And you know, that's part of the challenge within an organization, is to figure out who are the people who know what they know, in other words, right? And that is not necessarily a hierarchical system. You can have, you know, very new frontline people who have a wealth of knowledge, and you can have the leaders in the organization who have a lot of knowledge. So the challenge is to think about how as a network, or how as an organization, or how as a unit, you share information. And that's what was part of, I think, of your succession toolkit.
Which is why we wanted to talk about, you know, that piece, because I know when we were going on this earlier, that succession plan, that whole, what am I going to do when I retire? Like, I want to make sure, I know what happened to me when, you know, there was nothing there when we walked in, but I don't want to leave my successor with that scary thought of what do I do next.
Put this up too. This one says, organizational values, core values to be outlined, sustainable through changing times. The passion will be passed to the right people. I like that. And that's when you're talking about what I was that you?